In the 1944 existentialist play No Exit, written by French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, three characters find themselves locked inside a room together. This room is hell. They start arguing about why they got sent to hell in the first place, and soon come to the conclusion that they were placed in this room together to make each other miserable. This is where the famous quote, "Hell is other people," comes from. However, later on, it's revealed that the door is actually open, and the three characters are given the opportunity to leave the room. But all three of them refuse to leave, convincing themselves they still have something to prove to each other. Because in the end, hell isn't really other people. Hell is that inner need we all possess to care about what other people think of us. Hell is the fact that we find it so hard to exist outside of other people's eyes. So in the end, the characters actually choose to remain in hell of their own accord. How crazy is that? What a story. Okay, so before we get to OREIMO's final OVA, let's cool things down a bit with some Eromanga Sensei. I mean, surely that show can't be as infuriating as OREIMO. Am I right, guys? So as I briefly explained in part 1, Eromanga Sensei is the story of Masamune, a 16-year-old light novel author, and his relationship with his 12-year-old stepsister, Sagiri, who never leaves her room. In the first episode, Masamune finds out that the illustrator he works with on his novels, the titular Eromanga Sensei, was actually Sagiri all along. And after this revelation, the two start spending more and more time together, and Sagiri slowly opens herself up and becomes more confident. Most of the plot revolves around their careers and the various projects they work on. It's kind of like Bakuman if Mashiro was 12 and Takagi was constantly trying to fuck him. Anyway, let's start off by talking about our protagonist's harem, like we did with OREIMO. And let's open up with Megumi. Megumi literally only exists so that we can have a scene where a middle schooler says, "私に反応しないなんて、お兄さんのおちんちんは使い物にならないですね." 何?今、おちんちんとか言わなかった。おちんちん大好きですけど。So, Megumi's whole character is supposedly that she's a normie who pretends to be sexually precocious, but actually doesn't know anything about sex. Which, I guess counts as a character trait? Some real bottom-of-the-barrel stuff there for Shimi. Come on, you can do better than this. And Megumi's goal in coming over to their house and telling Masamune that she loves dicks is apparently to get Sagiri to come to school, because she's the class rep and she wants to be friends with everyone. Okay, so Megumi is a fake, precocious middle schooler class rep normie whose main goal is to befriend everyone in her grade. Wow, that's a multifaceted character right there. Sagiri, of course, refuses to leave her room, and so she decides to communicate to Masamune via an earpiece and instruct him on what to do. Megumi realizes what's going on, and so decides to make both Masamune and Sagiri extremely uncomfortable by getting really close to Masamune and asking him if he's ever kissed anyone before, in order to get some kind of reaction from Sagiri, I guess? Let's not forget that this girl is trying to become friends with Sagiri by seducing her brother. Yep, that makes sense. After Masamune reveals to Megumi that Sagiri draws lewd art, Megumi wonders if the two are perhaps in some kind of weird relationship, to which Masamune responds, "Just because we live together doesn't mean we're in a romantic relationship." Right. This is the guy who, just in the previous scene, was saying that there's no way he would fall in love with Megumi so fast because he washes Sagiri's underwear every day, and she's much more attractive than Megumi. Okay, dude. Okay. He then goes on to explain that even if Sagiri doesn't leave her room, she's still his pride and joy. What a great message this show is delivering, huh? Don't try to fight your little sister's hikikomori ways. Keep her cooped up in her bedroom so you can slowly groom her and jerk off to her underwear until she's old enough to consent to sex. This show's fucking great. Next up is Elf Yamada, who is essentially Masamune's rival in the light novel game. and it turns out that Elf over here really wants Eromanga Sensei to draw the illustrations for her next novel, so some tensions arise between the two of them as Masamune sets out to prove his worth to Sagiri so that she won't choose to work with Elf over him, even though he has absolutely no reason to believe that she would ever do that, but I guess you have to create conflict somehow, right? In the next episode, Elf moves in right next door to our main characters, but they're unaware of this because somehow no one noticed someone moving in right next door. Anyway, Masamune decides to go check this place out because there's this whole rumor about a ghost playing the piano which is making Sagiri scared, and of course he sees Elf playing the piano naked, because of course she is. In this episode we find out more about Elf's character. It seems like her whole thing is that she's a very proud person due to the fact that she's been so successful at such a young age. She's only 14 and her work is already being adapted into anime, and she's already bought her own house. Damn. After inviting Masamune in, she gives him a whole speech on nudity and how cool and divine nudity is. I guess that's a character trait? After getting into an argument about the use of nudity in Elf's novels, Masamune decides to propose a challenge. Whoever writes the most interesting novel gets to use Eromanga Sensei as their illustrator. And again, no one has actually asked Sagiri if she's okay with this. And 2 weeks later, when Masamune has finished writing his novel, it turns out that Elf hasn't written shit, and she gives this weird speech about how you should only write when you're motivated and inspired to do so, and she doesn't consider what she does to be work, because she only does it when she enjoys it. She says that being a professional writer is her hobby, which, I mean, that's just fucking stupid. Okay, let me sum up Elf's character so far for you. She's a 14-year-old light novel author who's extremely proud of how successful she is and constantly holds that over fellow authors, but doesn't consider it to be her job and only ever writes when she feels like it. Oh, and she's also a nudist. I think we're seeing a trend here of a method of character writing that essentially amounts to drawing a basic outline of a character and then just throwing random character traits and quirks at it until something sticks. I feel like Fushimi is just going with whatever pops into his head, even if it doesn't make sense. Wait, what the fuck am I saying? Of course that's what he's doing. These people aren't characters, they're just random assortments of quirks, which, despite everything I've said about OREIMO, is at least something you can't levy against that show. Its characters kind of made sense as people. You understood what they were about, what their motivations were. They had clear and distinct personalities. They were, characters. Poorly written characters, but characters nonetheless. And this is one of the first hints of the major difference between that show and this one. The episode ends with Masamune returning to Elf's place the next day after she said that he should come back tomorrow because she decided to work hard like he did, and she greets him with a maid outfit and cooks him a delicious meal. Oh, okay, I guess her character makes even less sense now. So you can actually just throw out character traits and swap them out for different ones when you feel like it. That's actually a really interesting approach to writing, Fushimi. Really experimental. By the way, if you've noticed I'm spending way more time on the details of each of these episodes as opposed to talking in broader strokes like I did with OREIMO's story, that's not just because this show has fewer episodes to cover, rather it's mostly due to the fact that nothing fucking happens in 90% of the episodes of this fucking anime. 3/3 of the second episode was just Masamune talking to Megumi in his fucking living room. Nothing happened. You ain't no Nishiyori scene, Fushimi. You can't just do a 12-minute scene of two characters talking. So if I only talked about the important storylines, I wouldn't be talking for very long. So please bear with me. Anyway, episode 4 sees Sagiri explaining to Masamune that she doesn't want to draw anything she hasn't seen in real life before, after he asks her why she always draws girls with small tits, which is one of the dumbest excuses for a series of fanservice scenes I've ever heard. But I guess that's to be expected at this point. Sagiri, you're a fucking artist for Christ's sake. How can you only be limited to drawing things you've actually seen in real life? In the very drawing that she shows Masamune, the girl has bunny ears on. How did she draw those? Does she own bunny ears? What about the clothes her characters wear? Does she have all of these outfits? Because if she's incapable of making tits slightly bigger, I'd imagine it'd be harder to draw an outfit that you've never seen before, right? Character traits, guys. Character traits. You gotta have them. After this, Masamune vows to write a light novel about his favourite thing in the world, his little sister. And wait, what? He says For the past year, I've been thinking of how to get you to recognize me as your older brother, and his solution to this is to write a light novel about her. Wait, dude. Since when is Sugiri your favourite thing in the world? I mean, let's just pass over how creepy that is, but before the start of this show, he had never even seen Sugiri a single time since the first time they met, but she's your literal favourite thing in the entire world. Damn. That's an interesting character trait. The thing you'll notice about Masamune and Sugiri's relationship in this show is that Masamune really wants to fuck his little sister, man. I mean, this guy just wants it so bad. The guy just can't take it anymore. He needs that 12-year-old pussy. And he even lies right to her face. He tells her that no matter how lewd her drawings are, he'll never be turned on by his little sister. Even though just the other day, he was bragging to Megumi about how he gets to wash his hot little sister's underwear. This guy is an absolute sociopath, and I fucking love it. So Masamune and Elf exchanged their manuscripts to decide who wrote the most interesting novel. And Masamune thinks Elf's novel is really good, but then Elf starts to cry, reading Masamune's, and she says, "There's no way I can compete with this." Which, I mean, we've all seen a dumb relationship anime before. We all know very well that this is intentionally ambiguous, but what she's really thinking is that this guy is so in love with his little sister, there's no way he's ever gonna fall in love with me. And obviously Masamune is completely oblivious to what she's saying, and he's all like, "Oh, was it boring? I'm sorry, I'm a dum-dum, duh." And it just becomes ultra melodramatic out of nowhere, because that's how you inject emotion into a lifeless Emoto light novel. You just make characters break down into tears every so often, so that your autistic audience can pick up on the particularly subtle emotional subtext of the scene. Elf tells Masamune that what he's written is essentially a 300-page love letter, so there's no way Eromanga Sensei would choose her novel over his. So she just shreds it, because why not? Masamune is then so happy about all of this that he jumps from Elf's balcony onto Sugiri's and lands straight on top of her. And it turns out that for the past 2 weeks, while Masamune has been writing his novel, Sugiri has been teaching herself how to draw bigger tits. Aww, how cute. But the reason she was doing this is because she thought Elf was an artist and that Masamune was going to drop her for Elf because of her limited abilities. I wonder how many times big character developments like this are going to be motivated by dumb, easily avoidable misunderstandings in this show. And the climax of this episode tries once again to be this big, triumphant, emotional moment where Sugiri and Masamune reaffirm their desire to work with each other. As if anyone watching this show ever thought there was even the slightest possibility that Sugiri would choose to work for Elf over Masamune, someone she's never met before. But now we get to the end of episode 4, which... here we go. After reading Masamune's manuscript, Sugiri looks all embarrassed and tells him that she really likes it, but that she doesn't want anyone else reading it because it's too embarrassing. She then proceeds to smile at Masamune and say, "Oh, classic mistake, Sugiri, you fucking idiot." Wow, we're already getting our next major misunderstanding. This show's really not wasting any time at all. Okay, so let's really take this thing apart, shall we? There's only a few possible explanations for what she just said. Either she wants to clue Masamune into the fact that she has feelings for him without explicitly stating it in a kind of shy teenage girl kind of way, or she genuinely thinks that the line, "I'm in love with someone," directed at the person you are talking about, is enough for that person to understand exactly who you're talking about and that it's in no way ambiguous. Now, I'd be willing to give her the benefit of the doubt and say that she's just being shy and purposely ambiguous because she doesn't have the balls to come right out and say it, but unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case based on how she reacts when Masamune says, "そっか。そうだ。これでいい。だって、俺たちは兄弟なんだから。俺はこいつの家族になるって決めたんだから." Okay, so now let's look at this from Masamune's perspective, shall we? Despite how fucking dumb Sugiri is for phrasing her confession this way, I can't realistically put all the blame on her because How fucking dumb does Masamune have to be not to understand that he's the someone she's talking about? She's a fucking neat, man. She literally doesn't know anyone else. Who else could she be talking about? I'm gonna fucking kill myself. This is it, guys. Okay, so let's move on to episode 5 to see what the aftermath of this big confession is.
Sagiri, ここ置いとくから食えよ。
So this next scene is actually literally incomprehensible. I dare you to explain to me what the fuck is going on here. Masamune tells Sagiri that he wants to talk to her about something important, and she responds that she wants to get changed first. So she changes into this, which is, I mean, that's not an actual outfit, right? That's just a long jumper. Masamune is understandably surprised that his sister chose to change into this, and seeing his reaction, Sagiri asks if it's weird. So he says, no, it's not weird. So she smiles and says, then I'm glad. But then tells Masamune not to stare at her. So, okay, up to here I get what's going on, kind of. Sagiri changes into something sexy, or as sexy as a 12-year-old can be, I guess. Please don't call the cops. Because she wants Masamune to change the way he sees her, but simultaneously gets mad at him for staring because she's a female anime character and therefore cannot stand the toxic gaze of the protagonist, even if that's literally the reason why she chose that outfit. That's all fine. I mean, it's stupid as fuck, but I can kind of at least understand what's happening. But these next few lines of dialogue are utterly bizarre. Masamune asks, why did you suddenly want to wear clothes like that? And she responds with, you don't understand? After making me read something like that? In reference to Masamune's light novel. And then he says, well, after reading something like that, I can understand you'd be cautious around me. Please, someone tell me what any of this means. I'm sorry that I'm spending so much time on this one interaction, which isn't even the worst part of this scene, by the way. We'll get to that. But what does this mean? There's only 2 interpretations I can come up with, and neither of them make sense. First interpretation is this. When Masamune asks her why she decided to choose that outfit, he's wondering why she would choose something so revealing, because it's not like the stuff she usually wears. Understandable question. And when she answers with, don't you understand why I would wear something like this after what you made me read? She's basically saying, well, I mean, you want to fuck me, right? That novel was essentially a love letter, so here I am. I'm dressing sexy for you. Okay, I kind of get that interaction. There's a logic to it. But Masamune's response to this invalidates that interpretation, because he says that he understands that she would be cautious of him after reading something like that. So, wait, what? Her dressing like this is her being cautious? How? This is deliberately inviting, right? So he's acknowledging that his novel was a creepy love letter, but now he seems to think that the way she's acting and the way she's dressed are indicative that she's creeped out by the book. Which leads me to the second interpretation, which is that this outfit is somehow being perceived as conservative. If you imagine Sagiri is actually wearing something really conservative that hides her entire body, then this interaction would make sense. He asks her why she's wearing that, and she says, well, you made me read something really creepy, dude, so I'm hiding my body from you. And then he's like, yeah, I guess I can understand that, my book was pretty creepy. There you go, perfect. But of course, this outfit is the opposite of conservative, so for fuck's sake, I'm literally going insane here. Someone please explain this to me in the comments. I can't stop thinking about it. I need to know. I need to understand what this means. Anyway, let's move on to the worst part of this scene. Oh, fuck. Masamune turns to Sagiri dramatically and says, I'm in love with you. Oh boy, this is it. They're actually doing it. Enough of those shitty anime tropes, enough of those retarded romance anime misunderstandings. They're finally going to admit their feelings to each other. He just said it out loud. There's literally no way this could go wrong.
俺はお前のことが好きだ。でもな、俺はお前の兄貴になりたいんだ。兄弟で恋愛なんてありえないだろ。
Oh, fuck. But no, surely Sagiri is going to clear things up. She's gonna say that it's okay because she loves him too. It's fine, everything's fine.
あの時私好きな人がいるのって。
ああ、だから俺の気持ちには応えられないってことだろ。ちゃんと分かってる。
Fuck you, man. But no, I refuse to believe that they're just going to end this scene like this. All she has to say is that he's wrong, and that the one who she's actually in love with is him. That's all she has to say. There's no reason why she wouldn't say that right now. It's gonna be fine. They couldn't possibly...
Sagiri?
Right, that's it. I'm out. And we're back to normal, people. Everything's fine. Let's just pretend that didn't happen. We're all good. Oh no, they're actually not going to leave it alone. They don't even have the common decency to shit on the floor and then pretend like nothing happened. They're actually going to smear the shit in my face. They're doing this on purpose. Sagiri gets mad at Masamune for asking her to draw lewd art of a little sister. And he's like, well, it's just that you draw lewd art and the main character of my novel is a little sister, so obviously that's just your job. But she's like, nah, I'm sure there's some kind of perverted reason why you're asking me to do this. And he's like, why would you possibly think that? And she's like, well, you just confessed to me, right? What a fucking bitch. You just confessed to him the day before, and now you're accusing him of being a pervert for asking you to do your job. What the fuck is wrong with her? But the worst part is that this fucking idiot over here says that he only fell in love with her as a brother. What? And that he would never have lewd thoughts about her. But then right after that, he's staring at her body like a fucking pervert and saying shit like this.
それと、エロさの質を変えてほしい。
質？
ちっとも色気なんかないお子様なのに、ふと気づいたら服の裾がめくれて太もも丸出しになってて、ついドキドキしちゃうみたいなエロさに。そう、まさにそんな。
For fuck's sake, man. This fucking show is draining me. It's really testing my sanity over here, man. I don't know if I can do this one, guys. Okay, so let's move on to the rest of this episode, shall we? I'm sure it'll all be fine from here on out. That was just a bump in the road. It can't possibly get any worse, that's for sure. So, Elf comes over and asks to meet Eromanga Sensei, so Masamune sets up a video chat with her, and Sagiri immediately asks to see her panties, because despite the fact that she's constantly accusing her brother of being a pervert, as soon as she puts this mask on, she becomes Harvey fucking Weinstein, and she doesn't quite pick up on the hypocrisy there. I can't fucking wait for Eromanga Sensei to get Me Too'd. Anyway, Masamune leaves to get some shopping, and when he comes back, Elf is showing Sagiri her underwear. She somehow didn't hear Masamune enter the house, or say "Tadaima," or walk into the living room, so of course, he walks in on her like this, and she takes a full 7 seconds to drop her dress. Anyway, Sagiri realizes that now that she's been drawing lolly characters, she can't draw normal-sized women anymore, so she wants Masamune to bring her something to get her creative juices flowing again, and he goes to the library to look for some hot characters. What the fuck is going on with her tits? Oh, jeez. Anyway, Masamune meets up with Megumi, who's decided that she wants to start reading light novels in order to have a common interest with Sagiri, so that it might be easier for them to become friends. She ends up getting really into them and finishes all the light novels she borrowed from the library within a day. So Masamune proposes that Megumi come over to their place and ask to borrow some from Sagiri, as an excuse to interact with her. Sagiri agrees to this, on the condition that she gets to use Megumi as a model for her drawings. And things get pretty messed up. They blindfold Megumi and tie her hands together, and Sagiri takes photos of her from every angle imaginable, while Masamune accuses her of being a fake slut, because she's getting all embarrassed, and we all know that one of Megumi's defining characteristics is that she wants to come off as a complete slut. So she cries out, God damn it, Sagiri. What the fuck is wrong with you? Someone needs to stop this girl. She's a fucking menace to society. And the worst part is that after all this goes down, Megumi even forgives her and is like, we're friends now, right? And Sugiri just says, nah, but I'll lend you some books though. What a fucking asshole. You just sexually assaulted this girl and you won't even be friends with her. The next big plotline of the story involves Masamune's rivalry with another author called Muramasa, who writes novels that are very similar to his but way more successful, which is damaging Masamune's bottom line, which you would think shouldn't be that big of a deal seeing as he's 16 years old, but apparently he has a deal with his aunt that he can only continue his current lifestyle if he makes a certain amount of money from his work. I'm not sure what that lifestyle is exactly. Do they mean the whole her never being around even though she's their legal guardian thing? But anyway, we all know what this means. We're gonna get a new cute little girl to add to the harem. Oh, and guess what? She's also even younger than Masamune. What a surprise. So it turns out that Muramasa over here is a bit of an arrogant asshole who has been intentionally taking Masamune's slot from him so he can't get published because, wait, what was her character motivation again? Oh yeah, that's it. She thinks his dream is stupid and doesn't like that his stupid dream is getting in the way of her dream, even though she's sold 14 million copies and he's sold about 250,000 or something, so yeah, I'm not exactly sure in what way his dream is getting in the way of hers, but I'm sure there'll be a good explanation for it. So the two of them decide to compete in this short story competition that their editor has organised, the winner of which will have their story published. And a few weeks later, while Masamune is hard at work turning his little sister novel into a 60-page short, Muramasa comes to visit him and wants to pay him to write novels just for her. Wait, what? Remember 2 sentences ago when I said I was sure they'd have a perfectly logical explanation for Muramasa's motivation? Yeah, I was wrong. You got me, Eromanga Sensei. You really subverted my expectations. Turns out Muramasa is actually Masamune's biggest fan, and only started writing her novels because she was depressed when Masamune stopped his Silver Wolf of Reincarnation series. So she decided to write her own novels in a very similar style. But then Masamune started writing a romantic comedy series which made her really mad, which is why she wants to crush his dreams so that he'll go back to writing action stories. Ooh, that's a solid character right there. All of her motivations definitely make perfect sense. But it doesn't matter if it's done because, of course, it all builds to a big emotional climax where Sugiri finally leaves her room and she's like, you can't have my brother, he's mine and I love him way more than you do and you can't crush our dreams. And it's a big breakthrough because she's walking down the stairs and it's her first time outside the bedroom since the start of the show. It's a big step forward for her character. Except if you actually think about it for a second and realise that she obviously leaves her bedroom every single day to go to the toilet and take a shower, unless she doesn't bathe at all and shits in a box which she empties out the window, which to be honest would actually be a pretty interesting character trait. Anyway, now that we know her backstory, I guess we can probably jump straight to the confession, right? Oh yep, there it is.
私は君のことが好きだ。
Anyway, of course, in the end, Masamune's short entitled The Cutest Little Sister in the World wins, but only because Muramasa's story was disqualified for being too long. Wow, what a victory. Episode 8 continues the theme of Masamune being a fucking idiot as he sees his sister in a yukata and proceeds to say that she looks really cute and kind of reminds him of Muramasa. After this, Sugiri somehow guesses that Muramasa confessed to Masamune through a novel. Damn, that's some good intuition you've got there, Detective Sugiri. And Masamune explains that he turned her down because he's in love with someone else, but admits that he does like her a lot because she thinks his novels are the most interesting in the world. Sugiri then asks him how much he likes her, and he says, about second in the entire world. What the fuck? You met this bitch like 3 weeks ago and she was attempting to crush your dreams, but now she's your second favourite person in the entire world just because she likes your dumb fucking books. Jeez dude, get a fucking life. Anyway, Sugiri of course asks Masamune who's first, even though she knows full well that the answer is her because he's already told her twice that he's in love with her, and well, who the fuck else would it be? The guy's second favourite person in the world is a random girl he met like 3 times. Obviously you're gonna be first. She then reacts like this. Which, I mean, you asked him, dude. You knew what he was going to say, and also, you've already confessed to him once before, so why are you being like this when he does the same to you? What a fucking hypocrite. I fucking hate her so much. What I'm about to say next will perhaps shock you, but please, stay with me. This episode is actually kinda good. I mean, as you saw from the opening scene, the writing's still dumb, but there's a significant step up in visual direction, pacing, and overall conveyance of tone in this episode. That opening scene, for example, had some pretty interesting mise-en-scène using Sagiri's door as an obstacle between the two characters, with them sort of dancing around it in accordance with the progression of the narrative beats within the scene. The first half of this episode is about Sagiri having to deal with being all alone in the house as Masamune is hard at work on his novel at the office, and we get to see how lonely they feel without each other. On his way back from work, he runs into Elf, who tells him that one of the other authors from the short story competition wants to have a little wrap-up party for the participants, which Masamune agrees to host at their house. And I refuse to learn this guy's name, he's not an actual character, he will not convince me otherwise. Despite the fact that Sagiri can't physically attend the party, she still communicates with the others via video chat, and we get a kind of cool moment where everyone says what their dream is, and Masamune says that it's to have one of his novels adapted into anime and get to watch it with his sister. Then everyone asks Sagiri what her dream is, and at first she says that Masamune already stated it, but they ask her to give another one. So she takes off her mask and says that she dreams of being the bride of the man she loves. So yeah, what's actually being said in the scene isn't particularly interesting, but the way it's being presented tells me that the people working on this episode actually gave a shit about making it feel genuine and slightly more subtle than the rest of the show. And the episode ends with a fairly well-directed scene where Masamune and Sagiri finally address some important issues. The scene starts with Masamune just talking about how the party went and everything, just small talk, but then Sagiri suddenly asks him if he was lonely the other day when he called her. So we then get into some actual interesting stuff, and as we do, the camera crosses the line in order to mark the dramatic shift of the scene. For those of you who don't know, crossing the line refers to when the camera breaks the 180-degree rule by going from one side of two characters interacting to the other side, which is something you're not supposed to do because it can create a spatial confusion of sorts, as the two characters will have changed directions within the frame. But it's a technique that can be used to great effect in order to convey some kind of shift, like it does in this scene. Masamune reveals that since losing his mother at a young age, he's been scared of being alone, which is why he was so happy to be part of a new family. And as they watch the fireworks together, Sagiri realizes that what Masamune really wants is a family. But she admits that she never really thought of him as family and doesn't want to be his little sister. Overall, this episode felt like an actual episode of a TV show. It had some actual heart to it. It's only natural then that we follow it up with a beach episode. And absolutely nothing happens in this episode, except Elf's older brother tries really hard to convince this random guy he's only just met to marry his 14-year-old sister, and Masamune's like, nah mate, I'm already in love with someone, but if I wasn't, yeah sure, I'd probably be in love with Elf. So that's cool, I guess. Oh, and we get to hear Elf's backstory, and she basically tells Masamune outright that if he were to propose to her, she would say yes. Jesus, Elf, you're terrible at being a tsundere. Oh, and the next episode is still on the island. Great. What's so boring about these episodes is that they don't develop anything. We just waste time rehashing things that we had already been made aware of. Yes, we get it, Elf is in love with Masamune and continuously flirts with him despite the fact that she won't come out and say it outright. Yes, we get it, Muramasa is in love with Masamune and is obsessed with everything he writes. And this is what happens once a character's love for the main character is exposed. They cease to be an actual person, and instead, all of their thoughts and actions now revolve around the protagonist. They can't be developed further. They can't change. They can't grow. They're just stuck in orbit. And I'll skip over the issue of why these people are even hanging out with each other to begin with. I mean, Elf being friends with Masamune, I can understand. They're neighbors, and we at least got a couple episodes developing their relationship. But what about Muramasa? She's been openly rejected by Masamune after she tried to destroy his dream. The only reason she's here is because she's now a part of the cast, so she has to attend every subsequent activity. And don't even get me started on this guy. I mean, who the fuck invited him? Seriously. But 2/3 of the way through this episode, we get this big dramatic moment where Muramasa reveals that she won't be writing novels anymore. But then we cut to another scene and they do that really annoying thing where one of the characters says, "Hey, by the way, what were you saying earlier about not writing novels anymore?" So we're made to believe that none of the characters questioned her after she said that, and instead were like, "Oh, okay." And then they walked over to this different location, cooked some food and started eating before anyone thought to ask her what the fuck she's talking about. I like to imagine that right after she made her big dramatic reveal, everyone just stood there and none of them gave a shit. Anyway, the way this is resolved is Masamune sits down with Muramasa, just the two of them, and he's like, "Hey Muramasa, so I've been getting these fan letters from a middle schooler for the past few years, and her handwriting is identical to yours. You're the one who wrote these, right?" And she's like, well, I guess you got me." And then he's like, "Oh, well that's cool because now I can accomplish my dream, which was to say thank you to the person who wrote me all these letters." And she's like, "Wait a minute, wasn't your dream to have your novel adapted into an anime and watch it with your little sister?" And he's like, "Yeah, bitch, I've got more than one dream. Wouldn't it be fucking retarded to stop writing just because I accomplished one of my dreams?" And she's like, "Oh shit, I'm a dumb bitch." So the episode ends with Muramasa telling Masamune that she now has a new dream, and that she's going to make him fall in love with her. For fuck's sake, see, this is the shit I'm talking about. Even when they try to do something with a character, in the end it always has to come back around to them being in love with the main character. They're not even allowed to have dreams that are unrelated to him. Similarly to the end of OREIMO Season 2, our penultimate episode of Eromanga Sensei is a flashback that details the origins of Sagiri and Masamune's relationship. The episode starts with Masamune returning from his trip and giving Sagiri a straw hat, telling her that they should go to the beach together sometime. A scene that exists for the sole purpose of letting us see Sagiri in a swimsuit. But she gets embarrassed and says, "Tell me what you think when we go to the beach for real." But this just raises the question, why the fuck was she wearing a swimsuit? Did she put it on just to show Masamune? And if so, why? What was the plan here? "Oh, Sagiri, what a tease you are, you 12-year-old child, you..." The flashback starts with Masamune explaining that he started writing novels about 5 years ago after his mother passed away. His emotional retelling of the circumstances that led to him discovering his passion for writing is of course interrupted by a random close-up of Sagiri's midriff, but don't let that distract you from the poignancy of this origin story. The framing device for these flashbacks is a conversation between Masamune and Sagiri as Masamune walks to a bookstore in Akihabara to see their new novel on display. The conversation is essentially a back and forth of flashbacks, as Sagiri too begins to explain what caused her to become the way she is now. She explains that for a period after her parents got divorced, she stopped going to school, but that something triggered her desire to go back. When Masamune asks what that trigger was, she says it's a secret. And we then jump into her flashback where we see her as a young child reading Masamune's first novels online, and after she leaves the very first comment on his website, the two begin to chat. And if right about now you're thinking, wait, what the fuck? So these two were already in contact with each other online, and then years later their parents just happened to get married. That's fucking ridiculous. Oh, don't worry, we'll get to that. So it turns out the moment Masamune decided to become a professional author was when he received his first piece of fan art from Sagiri. Of course, he still doesn't know the person he was speaking to was Sagiri. So Sagiri starts going to school again after Masamune explains to her why he likes writing. And so in the end, they pull a bit of a Bakuman and decide to stop talking to each other until they've both become professional artists. And this type of thing always pisses me off, but here it's even more absurd considering the fact that they're both children. A 7-year-old child does not have the level of emotional restraint and stoicism to stop talking to the one person who is a constant source of joy in her otherwise depressing life and who inspired her to actively pursue a dream of becoming an artist. I think the thing that annoys me the most about these flashbacks, beyond how dumb and contrived their situation is the fact that Sagiri is literally 7 fucking years old, and yet she talks the exact same way she talks in the present and seems to be just as mature. I mean, Masamune comes off as slightly more immature, but Sugiri is literally just the same person. But of course, all of this culminates in this incredible scene of Ouroboros-style self-fellatio as Masamune sees the fucking OREIMO gang walk past with his novel, and he's like, I hope they enjoy what I created. And I'm like, oh fuck! Biggest crossover event since the Avengers. It was all worth it just for this. You fucking did it, Fushimi. You fucking did it. Oh, and Sugiri completes her arc for the episode by managing to leave her room to greet Masamune when he returns. But who the fuck cares about that shit? Both Kirino and Kuroneko like the illustrations of the novel. Oh my fucking god. And Kyosuke fucking turns back. He sees Masamune, man. He fucking looks straight at him. It's like a passing of the torch, if you will. From one sister fucker to the next. The journey continues. It's so beautiful. It's the cycle of life, dude. And for some reason, this isn't the last episode of the season, despite the fact that this would have been a perfect note to end the season on, and we instead get this finale that feels completely inconsequential. Okay, so this last episode is actually really confusing because we start off with Sugiri streaming and she tells her fans that she has this new method of drawing cute girls that she's really excited about. Then we cut to a quick flashback of her on the phone with Elf, who's asking her if it's okay for Masamune to go to camp with them. But Sugiri is like, nah, he can't come, he has to take care of me. So Elf says, well, if you let him come, me and Muramasa will do anything you want. Of course, because the only way anime characters know how to get other people to do things for them is to completely offer up their body and soul. We then see Sugiri showing the stream drawings of characters clearly modelled after Elf and Muramasa, implying that she got them to pose for her. Makes sense so far, right? But this is where my brain melts and I go completely fucking insane because of how much the following scene makes no sense at all. So Elf and Masamune arrive and Sugiri shows them the drawings she wants them to act out, which they then do, all of which is supposed to be a source of inspiration for Sugiri's drawings. Someone please explain this to me. Why does she need inspiration for something she's already drawn? I thought she could only draw things she'd already seen. What does it mean? Does it make sense? Am I losing my mind? Is this show even real? Is it a figment of my imagination? Do I have a sister? Do I want to fuck my sister? What even is anime? In another scene, Masamune comes up with a really flimsy excuse to pat Sugiri on the head. He says that, just like her, he needs to see the real thing in order to write about it, which is obviously retarded for so many reasons. He used to write an action series, so there's obviously no way he could have seen any of the shit he was writing about, but anyway, never mind that, it's obviously just a stupid excuse to inappropriately touch his 12-year-old sister. So we then get treated to the softest softcore porn I've ever seen.
じゃあ触るぞ。
どうぞ。
Oh, and the librarian, who we haven't seen since she lost control of her tits a few episodes ago, pops up to tell Masamune she might be in love with him. Isn't that cool? Instead of, actually building up their relationship by making use of the old technique of letting it play out on screen and developing it over the course of a few episodes, you just randomly throw her in the mix when things start to get stale. No, that's a very interesting way to write a story. Keeps you on your toes. Anyway, that's it. I refuse to talk about the scene where none of the girls except Elf know how to draw a dick, despite the fact that they all know what they look like. I mean, Eromanga Sensei especially. She literally draws porn and has been exposed to porn before. Let's just move on. And yes, I'm skipping the OVA because this video is already long enough. Now that we've taken a look at the bulk of the story of these two shows, don't worry, I'll be getting to the OREIMO ending in a minute, let's start addressing some of the major differences. First off, our protagonists. To be completely honest, I think that Masamune is a better protagonist than Kyosuke. Kyosuke is the ultimate carbon copy light novel harem protagonist. No personality, no interests, no goals, no desires, nothing. Just a dude who's literally nothing outside of his reactions to the girls in his life. If they didn't exist, he would be a blank slate, just aimlessly wandering around like a zombie. Sure, he has a semblance of an arc, but he's boring as fuck. Masamune, on the other hand, is an actual character because he has a clear goal. He just really wants to fuck his sister. And because of this, he's a somewhat more entertaining character. Whereas Kyosuke comes off as a kind of failed Kyon type, Masamune just seems unapologetically dumb and mostly comes off as a sexual predator who's grooming the 12-year-old who lives upstairs, which I guess is an interesting take on the light novel protagonist archetype, I must admit. Our two main girls, however, are basically equally annoying, but for different reasons. Kirino is an abusive brat who takes all of her anger out on her older brother, both verbally and physically, and Sagiri is a lazy, unappreciative leech who takes advantage of her brother's kindness and only says thank you for the first time in episode 14. Sagiri and Kirino do share one extremely annoying personality trait, however. They're both characters who have some kind of hobby that is explicitly erotic or perverted, yet both consistently and hypocritically call out their brothers for being perverts, which is really, really annoying. Unlike in OREIMO, there's never a single shadow of a doubt that Masamune will end up with Sagiri, so none of his other relationships ever really feel relevant or interesting. OREIMO managed to set up several relatively believable candidates for Kyosuke, whereas here, Elf's constant attempts to jokingly refer to Masamune as her boyfriend just come off as desperate and demeaning to her character, as do everyone else's attempts to show interest in him. Because we know that no matter what, this guy wants to fuck his sister so bad that there's no way he's ever going to choose one of these girls over her. As opposed to OREIMO, where, for a moment at least, the idea of Kyosuke ending up with Kuroneko seemed somewhat plausible. Just let it go, man. Just let it go. I think the difference between Kyosuke and Masamune is, in some ways, emblematic of the overall difference between these two works. Whereas Kyosuke is representative of a certain kind of light novel protagonist that was popular at the time, and still kind of is, Masamune is a degeneration of that archetype, just as Eromanga Sensei is a degeneration of an Emoto light novel series. Another aspect of Eromanga Sensei that encapsulates this sense of degeneration is the fanservice. OREIMO is pretty run-of-the-mill when it comes to fanservice, generally occurring when the protagonist, from whose eyes we are witnessing the story, is himself witnessing the fanservice, which is usually how anime handles this kind of thing. It's still pervy, but it being presented from the character's perspective sort of justifies its presence, and OREIMO's explicit fanservice is actually surprisingly restrained. Eromanga Sensei, on the other hand, does not give two shits about justifying the existence of its fanservice, and takes on more of a voyeuristic approach that actually makes you feel bad for the characters involved. We often experience the fanservice from the perspective of an omniscient third person that exists purely to tease the audience. Shots like these aren't presented from any one character's perspective, they're just being shoved down our throats because, after all, this is an anime about a guy trying to fuck his sister, so who the fuck cares? The general philosophy here seems to be, if there's a spot you can fit in some fanservice, then just throw it in. But the consequence of this is that you're no longer immersed in one specific character's gaze. You're just being presented with a slideshow of pervy pictures that come off as really forced and unprovoked. Essentially, it's bad fanservice. If you're not going to try to make it relevant to a character's perspective, or have it be representative of how a specific character is trying to present themselves to another, then why should I care? Why would I watch this instead of just watching porn? The point of these shows is that they're supposed to make you feel more involved in the story, and therefore more immersed in the ecchi moments, by making you care about the characters and creating circumstances that, while they might feel contrived, at least follow some kind of logic. It's the difference between a scene where a guy accidentally walks in on a girl taking a bath or something. Sure, it's ridiculous and gratuitous, but at least it's kind of an excuse to give the audience some fan service, as it's a situation that could plausibly occur, as opposed to a scene where you just have two characters sat in a room talking, and then all of a sudden you get a close-up shot of the girl's panties for absolutely no reason, and you're like, what? Why did I just see that? It feels like they're using subliminal fanservice techniques to keep the weebs interested. In the end, OREIMO was nowhere near as fanservice-y as I was expecting it to be based on its premise. Its fanservice generally isn't visual, it's narrative. The show derives its pleasure from repeatedly putting Kyosuke in questionable situations, but doesn't really exploit those situations for sexual gratification with explicit shots like Eromanga Sensei does. And of course, another consequence of this is that in Eromanga Sensei, none of these shots are actually gratifying in any way. They're just tiring. The more fanservice you have, the less effective it will be. And they try to be playful and self-aware about it, like in this scene with Megumi, or the scene from the beach episode where Elf asks Masamune to apply sun lotion on her body. But the problem with this, other than it just being sorta creepy, is that characters like Megumi and Elf who constantly try to sexualize themselves end up desensitizing us to the sexuality of the characters, because the visuals are just constantly shoving it in our faces. So when Elf takes off her bra, I can't empathize with Masamune's shock, because I've become used to spying on these girls from every angle imaginable. Okay, here we are. We're getting ever so close to the end of our journey. It's now time to talk about the conclusion of OREIMO. So, the last OREIMO OVA starts off right where we left off in the penultimate episode of Season 2. After turning Ayase down, telling her that he can't go out with her because he likes someone else, Kyosuke goes to meet up with Kuroneko. Oh my god, here we are. Finally this show is going to do the right thing. Finally Kyosuke is going to dismiss his fucked up, toxic relationship with his sister and accept his feelings for Kuroneko and...
Ruri, 俺はお前と付き合えない。好きな奴がいるんだ。
Dear viewers, there's something you have to understand. I reached a point while watching these shows where I genuinely started to question if I was beginning to enjoy watching them or not. OREIMO especially, since it's 32 episodes total, whereas Eromanga Sensei is just 13. 32 episodes. That's about 11 hours of Syscon material being injected straight into my veins. So I was sort of worried about how this was going to affect me. Would my standards be lowered by exposing myself to this trash? Would I start to like it? Oh no, what if I actually got into this stuff? And this happens because when you're watching a show with the intent purpose of making a video about it, you're no longer asking yourself the question, am I enjoying this enough to continue watching it? You just power through because you have to. And since you're not asking yourself that question, because the answer doesn't matter, you sort of let your guard down, in a sense. You keep a critical eye open, but don't really judge it in the same way you would a show you were watching just for entertainment. Because whether it's good or bad, you'll have something to write about, so it doesn't really matter. And that's a strange state of mind to be in for 11 hours, because you actually become desensitized to the whole thing, and by the end of it you're like, you fucking retard Kyosuke, Kuroneko is the best girl, why the fuck would you do this? Fushimi, I hate this show so much, fuck you, you piece of shit light novel protagonist, how could you do this, you fucking little shit, you didn't deserve this fucking... And yeah, you end up getting a little bit too invested in it, you know? And this is the true tragedy of OREIMO. Not the trashy premise, the fan service, the bad writing, or the fact that the protagonist wants to fuck his own sister. No. The real tragedy is that this show managed to construct a semi-believable romance between Kyosuke and Kuroneko. A romance that, unlike many other relationships in this show, never felt forced. A romance that developed naturally from two acquaintances who happened to be put into circumstances where they grew attached to each other. A romance that felt genuine and almost realistic, and above all, a romance that made sense. This is the tragedy of Kuroneko, an innocent girl who had to bear the burden of the modern anime protagonist's sins. It's not often that you feel like a character deserves better than the shitty work of fiction she was born into. But this is one of those cases. From the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry, Kuroneko. I'm truly, truly sorry. But Kyosuke just doesn't give a shit, and he's straight back to it. In the very next scene, he's asking his sister out on a Christmas date in Akihabara. Only once they're there does he inform Kirino that he's booked a hotel room for them so that they can see the sky tree at night. What the fuck is wrong with this guy? So anyway, while they're on their romantic outing, Kirino tells her brother that she's decided to go abroad again after she graduates. And so, hearing this, Kyosuke decides to confess his feelings to her once and for all. But just as he's about to, she runs away, perhaps terrified of hearing what she's about to hear, or terrified of how she might react to it. So as Kyosuke is chasing after Kirino, Saori, her sister, and Kuroneko appear out of nowhere in a car and tell Kyosuke to jump in so they can help him chase down Kirino. Apparently they were literally stalking him to see how things would turn out, but we don't even have time to address how weird that is because now we get to the big moment, the ultimate climax of the show, the big confession. They finally find Kirino. Kyosuke gets out of the car and grabs hold of her. And he finally says it. He tells her that he's rejected all the other girls, despite how perfect they were, for her, his own sister. And as he's confessing this, Kuroneko plays a recording of Kyosuke confessing that he's in love with Kirino from these speakers in the back of the car. What the fuck? First of all, why the fuck was she recording him when he said that? Second of all, why the fuck would they do this? Is anyone's behavior in this show held to any kind of logic anymore? Or has everyone just lost their fucking minds at this point? Anyway, at first, Kirino reacts exactly the way you would expect her to, but then after Kyosuke really drives it home and asks his own sister to marry him, she gives in and says,
says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Now, if we go back to that character arc that was brought up at the end of Season 2 about Kyosuke and Kirino's relationship forcing Kyosuke to become a proactive person again who actually gets stuff done instead of lazing around all the time, wouldn't it make more sense that Kirino and Kyosuke's relationship forces both Kyosuke and Kirino to become better people? Kyosuke in the way I just explained, and for Kirino by making her be less of an asshole to her brother and coming to see all the qualities she once admired in him again, and also by being more open about her otaku side and more honest with her friends. And you might say, well, that is happening, isn't it? And I'd say, yes, to an extent. That definitely seems like the overarching story they were going for. But how does this ending fit into all that? Doesn't Kyosuke and Kirino indulging in this eroge fantasy kind of completely ruin the established story of a relationship that makes them become better people? Immediately after the confession, Kirino returns to her usual self. When they get back to the hotel room, she can't wait to get back to her game, telling Kyosuke that even during his confession, she was thinking about this eroge. You've really grown as a character, haven't you? And Kyosuke over here just seems to be reveling in his own incestuous feelings. The overall tone of this scene is delusionally tragic, especially when Kirino thanks her brother for falling in love with her and then proposes that they continue playing this game because it might help them with their current situation. What a great scene, eh? Oh, but it gets better. So after Kirino closes her laptop, realizing that she's not really in the mood to play an eroge right now, Kyosuke jumps on the occasion to present his little sister with the ring that he bought her for Christmas. Kirino asks, "Is this an engagement ring?" To which Kyosuke responds with a surprised reaction before admitting that, yeah, I guess it is, but I never thought I'd propose to my own little sister. What a great guy. And when Kirino says, "We're siblings, it's not like we can get married anyway," Kyosuke remarks, "Stop bringing us back to reality." And she responds with, "I keep telling you not to confuse games with reality." I mean, seriously, what the fuck is the message here? It's all so confused and meaningless. Are they trying to make it all okay by pointing this out? And the worst of all this is that their friends are actually encouraging them. Even Kuroneko, who one episode prior was crying over Kyosuke's rejection, is now like, yeah, I guess it makes sense. It's always been pretty obvious that you wanted to have sex with your sister. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Have I entered a weird fucking David Lynch Twin Peaks version of a light novel adaptation? Is this some kind of galaxy brain deconstructive masterpiece? Is this real? No. this definitely isn't real because in the next scene, Kyosuke leaves the cafe and receives a text from Kanako, who is Kirino's other model friend that I'm not sure I've even mentioned before, telling him to come to her show where she's performing as Miruru, Kirino's favorite anime character, and he goes to the show and she literally stops everything to point him out in the audience and confess her love to him. Yep, you heard that right. The reason I've hardly mentioned this girl, by the way, is that her and Kyosuke have not had a relationship of any kind, really, except in that one episode where all the girls seemingly consumed some kind of love potion that made them fight over who gets to clean up Kyosuke's fucking apartment. Other than that, she's showed no signs of having feelings for this utterly uninteresting man. But lo and behold, she too is in love with him. And when he inevitably rejects her, she swears that one day she will become a great idol, so that he will regret his decision. And then it's over. The scene just ends. That's it, dude. Don't even sweat it, man. Just don't even worry about it, dude. Let's just move on. Back at home, Kirino has her brother listen to these recordings she made when she was younger, before she and Kyosuke stopped talking. And they reveal, well, I'm sure you can guess what they reveal. Turns out Kirino was in love with her brother and wanted to marry him from the beginning. Sorry that I have to sigh after every single paragraph, by the way. Now we reach the final episode, where we get what is perhaps the most hilarious scene in the entire show. After graduating, Kyosuke walks home with Kirino and they bump into Manami, the final obstacle. And this is where Kirino then turns into the most obnoxious, despicable character I've ever seen and starts boasting to Manami that she won and that she gets Kyosuke all to herself. She literally stands in front of her gloating until Manami punches her in the stomach and a literal fist fight ensues. Jesus Christ. So the two of them have both had all this pent-up hatred towards each other that's developed over the years, seeing as they're both each other's main rivals in obtaining what they wanted. And after they get it out of their system, Manami gives them the reality check they so desperately needed.
誰も言わなかったみたいだから、私がはっきり言ってあげる。兄弟で恋人になるなんて気持ち悪いと思うよ。たくさんの人が気持ち悪いって感じると思う。当たり前だけど、兄弟では結婚なんてできないし、キリノちゃんの気持ちが本物であればあるほど、大人になっても変わらないものであればあるほど、誰かが不幸になる。誰にだって、たとえキョウちゃんにだってどうにもならないことなんだよ。だからね、キリノちゃん、キョウちゃん、まあ十分でしょ。夢から覚めて、現実を見て、普通の兄弟になりなさい。
In response to this perfectly reasonable speech, Kyosuke admits that Manami is completely right about everything, and that all these rules and social conventions exist for a reason, and they make sense, but that he will continue to fight against them nonetheless. So here, we almost seem to be returning to the central theme of the beginning of the series, which was essentially about defending otakus and their interests despite how weird they may seem. But I really have to question the narrative methods of the author. Developing a storyline where the main character has to defend his sister's perverted hobbies to their judgmental father is one thing. Seemingly transforming an incestuous sibling relationship into a narrative representation of the fight for otaku acceptance is something completely different. The author doesn't have a good argument to defend this situation like he did in the beginning, yet still seems determined to make this out to be an actual worthwhile stance. The show repeatedly points out how creepy and wrong their relationship is, yet appears to think its opposition to that point of view is somehow valiant, even though this guy is literally ruining his life before our eyes. But it's all okay. Why? Because right at the end, they manage to find the perfect loophole. So we jump into this faux wedding ceremony that Kyosuke has apparently organized. I mean, it's just the two of them in a church and they've somehow managed to buy a wedding dress. But anyway, they actually really unofficially get married and they kiss. And I literally cringed at this point. This is the first time I've been put off by incest. But then, the big twist. Turns out they promised each other that they would act like a couple until graduation, and after that they would return to being normal siblings. Oh, alright. That makes it all okay. So she gives him back the engagement ring, and they go back to their normal lives. Except, what the fuck happens now? Do they both just forget their incestuous feelings for each other? They were supposedly in love. That's not how love works. This girl has been lusting for her older brother since she was in elementary school. Is she really just gonna move on from this that easily? And what about Kyosuke? Was this plan really worth ruining all of your other relationships just to pretend to go out with your little sister for a month? And you didn't even fuck her. Jeez, dude. You really fucking wasted that one, didn't you? If you left everything else exactly the same and just changed the ending, this show could have been a kind of okay comedic story about two siblings having to rediscover their affection and admiration for each other that they've long since lost. A nice rekindling of a sibling relationship that results in the betterment of both characters. Kirino opening herself up to her friends and family and being honest with herself, and Kyosuke getting off his ass and becoming the person Kirino once admired, and getting into a serious committed relationship with someone who's not his sister, therefore proving that he's an adult now and no longer a useless slacker. That would have been a perfect conclusion to the story, the sitcom elements just being self-aware jokes about the various situations the siblings find themselves in and how it relates to the games Kirino plays, and nothing more than that, because it doesn't need to be. When I first heard of OREIMO and its controversial ending, I just assumed it was a comedic fanservice show that had the balls to stick the sitcom landing and actually go through with it. And I expected it to be some good old anime trash that I could sit down and enjoy on an ironic level. But that's not what OREIMO is. And the reason this ending isn't fun anime trash self-indulgence is because of how melodramatic and self-serious the show becomes. It can no longer be enjoyed as trash, because it now thinks it's an actually moving work of drama that has something important to say. This isn't a complex tale of forbidden love, guys. It's fucking trash. Alright guys, let's wrap this shit up. Now that we've been through the plot of these two amazing anime, I think it's time to get down to the big question. The big question that literally no one anywhere cares about the answer to. Which of these two shows is better? Short answer, OREIMO. Long answer, Eromanga Sensei? Technically, OREIMO is a better show. It has characters you understand, it has a sense of story progression with an overarching emotional through line about a tumultuous relationship between two siblings, stopping off at self-contained episodic stories along the way, building a fairly well-rounded supporting cast. But the fact that it kind of starts off okay and then turns into, well, you know, kind of makes it even worse than Eromanga Sensei, because at least that show doesn't even put up a pretense of an actual story. Eromanga Sensei feels like it was written by an AI that had access to all of the most middle-of-the-road fanservice light novel series out there, from which it constructed the perfect formula of a completely disposable harem anime that would be popular for one season and then immediately forgotten, accomplishing the bare minimum in terms of character, conflict, and emotion, just enough to convince the people watching that this isn't just a collection of fanservice scenes. In short, Eromanga Sensei is just a meme. So while OREIMO does hit certain thematic and character beats correctly, and is generally well paced for the most part, in the end it loses out to its own sense of self-importance, which contradicts its self-indulgence, which we saw in the ending, where the writer's desire to have the two siblings end up together comes at the cost of a sensical conclusion to the themes of the story. Eromanga Sensei, on the other hand, is just actual trash, and its few attempts at tackling sincere emotions never really get in the way of its trashiness. So in a weird way, Eromanga Sensei feels less confused than OREIMO. And I would hate for you to get invested in a show that eventually betrays you by turning to shit. So, you know what? Don't watch OREIMO. Just watch Eromanga Sensei instead. It's shorter, and it's exactly what you expect it to be. Wait, what the fuck am I talking about? Don't watch either of these shows. They're both terrible. Why did I even make this?